Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. I am Natalie Brake with Early Learning Indiana, and I am excited to be joining you guys today to talk about our Stronger Together opportunity and to really dive into the RFP that we have available right now. So same reminders for all of our webinars. I know many of you on here are frequently joining us, one to talk about the Stronger Together opportunity, but also for some of our others. We will have the participation audience muted during this, but please put your questions in the question bar on the right. We will try to answer those at the end, but we will be looking at possibly answering some of them as we go through if we're able to. I will put one caveat to that today is that we do have office hours coming up with myself and the members of our TA partner organization from Opportunities Exchange. So if you do have very, very specific questions just about yours, what I would like for you to do is ensure that you bring those to the office hours so we can really dive into what you're doing. All right, well, let's get started on what we're looking at today. We are here together to walk through our RFP for the Stronger Together opportunity. What we're going to be doing today is just a quick reminder of what the Stronger Together grants are. So make sure that if we have anybody new from any of your groups joining us, that we're all on the same page of what we're looking for. We're going to invite on our TA partners from Opportunities Exchange to join us throughout the remainder of the webinar then, and we will have them helping us to address some of the questions. So I'll have Sharon and Amy available, Sharon on camera in a little bit, and Amy helping answer questions in our questions box. And then we're going to get into the meat of what we're going to talk about today, the RFP components that Early Learning Indiana is looking for in the completed proposals returned to us if you are looking and interested in starting one of these shared service hubs. We will also then share some additional opportunities for support and answer questions at the end. So I know many of you on the line here are very familiar with Early Learning Indiana. There's a couple of new names though, so just so that you know who we are and what we do, we educate and activate an ecosystem of stakeholders to create accessible, high quality early education opportunities for children in our state. And we do that in three important ways. Firstly, by practicing what we teach every single day in our own network of community-based lab schools across the greater Indianapolis area. I think when we talk about the Stronger Together opportunity, it's incredibly crucial for everyone to know that Early Learning Indiana is a provider. We understand the provider mindset, we understand the hardships, and we understand the importance of providing high quality early education every single day and taking on that task every single day with the right intention and the right supports so that we are able to give the highest care possible to our children and families. And then we want to be able to share what we know so that others are able to do the same thing. We would love for every child under the age of 6 in Indiana to be able to have access to affordable, high quality childcare. And that occurs when we work together and we share the best possible ways to provide operations and improve learning outcomes for children. And thirdly, Early Learning Indiana helps drive system level change by addressing barriers to accessible, affordable, and high quality early education. If you are newer to working with Early Learning Indiana, I'd love to set up a time to talk with you about what we're doing and what you're doing and how we can work together to achieve our goals and ensure that every child has that opportunity to be ready for kindergarten and beyond. One of the ways that we can ensure that is exactly what we're going to talk about today, our Stronger Together grants. So we've talked about a little bit on some of the previous webinars, really understanding what shared services are and understanding that if we combine forces, if we share the cost of revenues across multiple sites, then we can apply those cost savings and the time from them to be redirected towards investments in teachers, strengthening workplace environments, improving wages and benefits, all of the things that help ensure that we have high quality care occurring within the classroom settings and between the teachers and the children. So Early Learning Indiana, with generous support from Lilly Endowment Inc., is taking proposals. Our RFP is open right now, and we're soliciting proposals from organizations for up to $100,000 to launch a regional shared service hub. So the core of it is this is what we're asking you to do. We are asking eligible organizations who are interested and ready to launch a shared service hub to tell us exactly how you're going to do that. And we know that's a big question, and we know that there are many who would love to start a shared service hub, but they need more support and information about how they're doing it. So throughout this process, we have been very excited and able to engage Opportunities Exchange to work with us, and they are the TA partner for this opportunity. So we have Sharon Easterling and we have Amy Friedlander who are helping to advise in this. And if you did miss our webinar last week about Shared Services 101, you can access the recording for that on the grant website. You can also, on that grant website, there's a little section called Resources for Applicants. And one of the things there is Shared Services 101, which is Sharon and Amy's presentation. So Opportunities Exchange's presentation around shared services, and it gets into all the details and suggestions, promising practices, and all the tips that they shared last week. It's an amazing resource for anybody who's considering applying so that you can ensure that you understand what are some of the common pitfalls of organizations who are starting a shared service hub, but also what are some of the examples and promising practices you can look to that may also work within your community. So I'm going to go on and invite Sharon to join me on camera. Love that I'm motioning like she's actually going to come in this room. I think she might just join me from where she's at. All right. Hello, Sharon. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm good. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, Amy's going to work on the backside. So if you guys do have any questions that go in the question box, if it's a short answer or an immediate answer, Amy's going to be looking at some of those, and then we'll also pull some of those out at the end. But for the next chunk of what we're doing today here, Sharon and I are actually going to walk through some components of Early Learning Indiana's RFP. So to let you know too, with these RFP components, there is something new was just added to our webpage this morning. We've had a few potential applicants ask for a copy of the RFP in its entirety. The RFP is available right now for you to apply. And there's links on the grant website, which take you to our submittable platform where you're able to submit your RFP or submit your proposal. However, if you want a copy to look at to say, I want to make sure I get all of the components together, or there's 4 people in my organization that need to sit down and talk about this. Can we have a copy of the question so that we can all look at it? You can now get that on the fund website, or the grant website has that available as a PDF to download, and it has all of the questions, the word counts, and all of those components you need to know to prepare for your proposal. So we're going to dive in. There's kind of 2 basic parts of the proposal. The first part is understanding about the organization that wants to become a shared service hub. And the second part, which is really in depth and really crucial, is about creating your business plan. So before we get into the business plan itself, we wanted to focus a little bit on the organization who will be the hub that you're looking to found. And there's 3 points that are incredibly important for you to consider for this hub. And the first is eligibility. The hub must be a tax-exempt, nonprofit organization incorporated in the state of Indiana. That's what allows you to be eligible to be the hub. That does not mean they can't have other partners across their county, across their community, but the actual organization who will be establishing, running the hub must be eligible. The other 2 components are these organizations must have the right approach and the right capacity to be able to do the work we're talking about. And Sharon, I wanted to know, can you explain a little bit by what you mean and what you've seen, because you've seen many organizations looking to start these shared service hubs, what you mean by having the right approach to creating these hubs?
Sure. So I think there are 2 words that I would use to describe an entity that is sort of a good fit to be a shared service hub. The first one is mission. This has to be a part of your mission. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to be a provider of childcare services. Let me give you a really good example. In Richmond, Virginia, several years ago, a Shared Service Alliance hub got started. And there was a request for proposals put out to the community. And the organization that was ultimately selected was a nonprofit organization whose mission was supporting children with autism and other disabilities. What was going on, they were a terrific organization. What was going on was they were really struggling to find high quality early childhood programs in neighborhoods where kids needed to be placed with typically developing kids. So they were feeling the need for expanding high quality, stable childcare programs in in a very visceral way. So being able to be a shared service hub, stabilize childcare businesses, address issues around quality was really important to what they did. So that's what we mean by mission aligned. The second word I would use is change. You've got to be committed to not only trying new things yourself, but leading that process, helping others through the process of doing things in a different way. Let's face it, if what we were doing today was working really well, we wouldn't need shared service alliances. So change is a big factor, and we'll talk a lot about that as we go through.
I think those are incredibly crucial to consider. I like the possibility of the alignment. Doesn't mean it has to be exactly offering childcare services. What it just means is that you have to be ready and able to do that. Um, we also put on here to note about capacity. We need organizations to launch these shared service hubs that are able to identify those common needs. And we're going to talk a little bit later in the business plan about identifying the specific services so that you can hone in on the services that are needed in your community, as well as creating that structure to share the resources. So really what you're talking about there with the change, they have to be able to create a new way of doing these services for the providers who are members of the hub.
Exactly right.
Okay. Well, in the RFP, you guys will all be able to see there are several questions about the hub organization at the start of the RFP, including things like sharing your mission, your website, brief descriptions, and what type of organization you are. Those are all allow us to assess whether you're eligible and if your approach and capacity are leaning towards the direction that we need in order for us to fund. And then we'll get into the bulk of the RFP, which is our wonderful business plan. So there are a lot of components to the business plan. I would tell everyone who's looking at this though, or if you've already looked at the RFP, not to be intimidated when you look at it because one, we really walk you through all of these components within the RFP and ask specific prompting questions. So it's not just tell us about the technology. There's prompting questions which help drive you to understand the aspects that you need to know and be able to share within the proposal. But also there are resources for several of these components that are available on the grant website. And as we go through, we'll note what some of those resources are. We have been able to take advantage of the common knowledge and the history and experience that Opportunities Exchange has, and they have been able to provide us with examples and narrow in on the focus for some of these aspects so that as you look to do your proposal, you can benefit from their knowledge and use that to apply towards what you're doing. So we're going to walk through each of these components on the business plan and look a little bit more at what exactly we are asking for in each of these, and then what you can learn from the experiences of Opportunities Exchange to help you make the best decisions for your proposal. So one of the first sections that you're going to be asked to define within your RFP are the services that you want to offer. And I will tell you, when I first got involved in some of these conversations around shared services, I only knew a very small percentage of the types of services that could be offered through this type of shared service model. And through my conversations with Sharon and with Amy, as they're talking about these, it was almost like a light bulb went off in my head of realizing how many administrative services there are, how many components there are to the work that is expected of childcare providers that really creates the opportunity for them to be financially sustainable and for them to grow. So there is a list of services that you will have to check off which ones you are looking to offer on the RFP. And it's really important as you consider this. I'm going to advise right now, do not go through and check off every single one of these services. It is not possible for you to start with every single one of these services. However, there is going to be an opportunity for you to understand which services may be right for you and which services may be right for the providers you're looking to serve. So as we look at these services, Sharon, what would you advise or what would you ask the potential applicants to consider when they think about what services they might offer?
Sure. So we have these two key words here, right? Achievable and impactful. So you want to find, you want to select a couple of things to do. You want to select a few things that, sometimes we call it low-hanging fruit. Like, what could you do that you'll be successful, and you can get it done pretty quickly, and that you'll be able to show some results in very short order. However, you also want to think about what will be most impactful. And so, as you look at this list of services, what I would encourage you to think about is, are there things on this list that providers are doing today that as a hub, we have expertise, we have access to resources, we could do them faster, better, in a less expensive way? Like, we could perform this service, take a load off of the provider, and also save them time and money. And if there are things that you can identify that you could do that would have that impact, then absolutely those are the things that you should go for. So pick a few things, pick some things that will be easy, and pick a few things that will be hard, but will have a real big bang for the buck.
I think it's really important that the applicants consider both of those aspects. We don't want them just to pick the ones that are going to be really easy, but not necessarily as impactful. But also don't pick 10 that are going to take a whole lot of effort, and therefore you're not able to really create a sustainable launch for your hub.
Right.
Well, looking at this list of services, there is nothing on there that I see that wouldn't be beneficial in some way. It just depends on the individual members you're looking for and where you have the capacity to start. So that is one point that we want to make to everyone, is that all of the services that are on here for a reason. We have been able to look at some of the data that we've collected from providers across the state and identified really what they see as some of the gaps, and a lot of it comes down to the administrative pieces. And if you were part of the Shared Services 101 last week, I think it makes a lot of sense. Why? Because we are asking our providers to wear all of these different hats, and we really need them to focus on the children and that aspect, and let's move some of these pieces off of them. Well, as you go through the RFP and pick your services, you will note on the actual application that when you choose a service, so any of these that you check mark, there are going to be questions that appear then on your RFP actual application that are related to the metrics around it. So for every service that you pick, you're going to be asked about your metrics. And it's really important that you relate your metrics specifically to the service you're offering. So there should be some components that, as you'll see in the questions there, it's for this specific service, what metrics could you possibly be looking at? And then how are you going to measure those metrics? Because we need to be able to show that you're having an impact, that you're actually saving funds for the child care. This is one of those components of the RFP where Opportunities Exchange has been able to offer, through their guidance and experience, suggestions for you to look at. So these sample business metrics for shared services is available on the grant website, and it will have all of the metrics that we're going to show on the next few slides available in one-page document for you to consider. So Sharon, can you tell us a little bit about some of each of these three kind of sections of metrics and relate them back a little bit to maybe one of the services?
Sure. So, so one of the bottom lines, one of the things, and we'll talk about technology in a few minutes, that you're absolutely going to need to do is you're going to need to select a child care management software and get every member of your alliance using the software and fully using the software. So let's look at the issue on this page: collect all revenue and on time. Uncollected revenue is a huge issue, and I cannot think of one project that we have looked at and been a part of where once a program got all of their family records into the child care management system, began to send invoices, and began to collect tuition online, where bad debt can go almost completely down to zero. It makes an enormous difference when parents have information in a timely, regular, sustained way. This is your balance. This is what you owe. Here's an easy way to pay it. But it's also really, really important. So that's going to have a big financial impact on the program. It's really important, though, that at the very beginning, you understand what their uncollected revenue or what their bad debt is right now, so that you can start to measure what the change is, and that you can show programs this is the difference that this is making. So that's an example around the business metrics. We've actually organized these around the Iron Triangle. OpEx founder Louise Stoney came up with this idea a long time ago, which is that you can't be successful in business unless your classrooms are full, you're collecting everything that's owed, and the amount of money per child you're collecting is at least close to what your actual costs are. It seems really simple. It's actually really hard for programs to do, and mostly it's hard because they don't really know where they stand relative to these things, because they don't have the data sort of at their fingertips. So I want to go to the next slide, Natalie, and we'll talk about one that is
Yes.
near and dear to all of our hearts: compensation.
Mm.
I've always said, if you get a group of child care directors in a room, seated around the table, and you start a conversation, within 5 minutes, the conversation will go to the challenges of staff compensation. I can't find good people. I can't keep good people. What am I going to do? My salaries are just not high enough. So shared services actually can have an impact. Now, hear me clearly. We need more resources in the sector. I'm not saying that shared services can fully solve the problem, but we can have an impact on compensation. How do we do that? Again, if we're able to create really efficient administrative practices, we can collect more money and we can fill every seat or pretty close to it. That's going to bring in more revenue. But also, programs may be paying for folks on their staff to do things like collect attendance via paper and pencil, collect and work with staff sign-in sheets, right? When you begin to automate processes, you need less people to move paper around. And if programs will then reduce the size of their administrative staff, they can actually shift money to teacher salaries. They can put a little more money in, maybe into benefits or set up a retirement program. So don't give up on compensation. Often as a field, we think, we can't do anything about it. It's too big a problem. But that's an example of a really impactful service. So you want to think about that. Natalie, you want to add anything, or you want to go to the third metric slide?
Well, I would say here too, one of the things that we hear a lot of times when providers are saying that they want assistance or they want to come together and understand their finances better is because they want to be able to offer higher wages to teachers. And so having those conversations, we'll talk a little bit later about who your members could potentially be and how you might market to them. That's a really great statement to be able to offer them about the benefit of participating in the hub. Is you're able to, through your participation, we're going to be doing these services and we're going to help you change your budget around to where you are able to put more funds into your teaching staff. It's a huge incentive for providers who already have that, want to do that. And I think especially right now, I don't think it's any secret across Indiana that we are struggling to find qualified teachers for our classrooms. Had a conversation about that just this morning about infant teachers and the reality that we have children who could be in seats right now if we had a qualified teacher to put in the classroom with them. So this is a huge selling point as you're looking to market into those potential members of the hub, that you have connected your services to these metrics to be able to help their business.
Right.
And here's our third chunk of metrics.
Right. Sustainability. So sustainability really depends on being able to have a consistently profitable business, right? You have to, year in and year out, you have to take in at least a little tiny bit more money than you put out. And so looking at sustainability, we want to take a look at what are the sources of funding that are feeding into this program. Are providers collecting all available revenue? So there's some common, and again, this is sort of low-hanging fruit, right? Like sometimes providers will choose not to participate in the food program, which is a significant source of revenue. And they say that because they just can't deal with the paperwork. There just isn't time. It's an excellent opportunity for a shared services hub to get those providers onboarded with a management system to help with that, and then to do that back office service. It brings significant revenue back in. Joint fundraising can be really helpful, particularly in these early years of shared service alliance building. A lot of funders are intrigued by this idea. And if you've got something really good going and you want to build that out or take a next step, you've got a good opportunity to raise philanthropic dollars. Multiple funding streams. A back office hub has a much better chance of being able to attract additional funding like pre-K or Head Start or early Head Start, because they have capacity to pursue grant funding, to manage the sometimes really onerous reporting requirements. So sustainability is about drawing in all the revenue and then really watching that bottom line and making sure that every day the program is operating at peak optimal efficiency and effectiveness, and with the skill set that the hub brings to the table, centers now have a fighting chance at being able to move toward those sustainable practices.
Excellent. Well, two things that I heard across the board for all of these components around metrics that I want to make sure is really clear to those who are potentially looking to submit a proposal is one, these metrics are all ones that do relate back to the services. So when we talk about metrics that we're asking for in your proposal for the services, we're not looking for things like we'll have this many members. We ask about that in other places. We're looking for your connection between the services offered and the sustainability, the functioning, the cost savings for the members that you're offering. So this is one of those areas where I can foresee that there may be a lot of individual questions. And so if you have time, think about it, talk about it with your team, and then come back and join us for our office hours. And we would love to be able to help you look at potential services and match them with metrics. I'm using we very generously there. I would love to talk with you about it, and Sharon and Amy will have wonderful ideas on how to match some of those services and metrics and what they could look like. Another thing that I want to point out here is many of these metrics may be more applicable to certain types of providers. So when you're thinking about your membership makeup and the services you're looking to offer, if you think your services are going to mostly appeal to family child care homes, you may look at what metrics are likely to be ones that would represent that type of service versus a center versus a ministry. So it's about being very intentional between membership, services, and metrics so that you are creating the possibility to really make an impact with the providers that you're working with. So we want to see that kind of intentionality in your proposal. And again, I'm going to make that plug to take advantage of the office hours if you have questions or just want to be assured that you're going down the right path, because we need to know that you understand as the hub how your services will be measured with these metrics and will make that impact with that type of provider. So that being said, that is a major chunk of what you're going to be doing. I hope it's something that it brings up a lot of conversation about what the needs are of the providers around you. And it is going to be something that you'll have an opportunity in your proposal to address every single service, the metrics, and how you're looking to measure those. The next section that the RFP is going to have you look at is the governance structure of your hub. And this is crucially important because we are asking for you to launch this hub that is going to have a role and going to have a relationship with different services and software vendors and members, and put your organization potentially in a different type of relationship with providers locally than you have been in before. So Sharon, what are some of the things that you would suggest when they're considering what type of governance model or how they would approach this for their hub?
Right. So last week when we talked about Shared Services 101, I showed you different examples, and I showed you a multi-site center that reorganized itself and then kind of reached out and pulled other programs in. I showed you the Shared Service Alliance in Chattanooga, the Chambliss Center for Children, which is a very strong anchor organization that actually has a management contract. The board of directors every year signs a management contract, basically handing off responsibility to the hub agency to hire staff to run the program, and then the board of directors kind of oversees. They supervise, if you will, the hub organization. So those are two kind of unique governance structures. What we see most typically from the hub agency is they work with centers and homes, and those entities remain independent 501c3s or even for-profit. In the case of home-based providers, they're sole proprietors. And they come into relationships through a memorandum of understanding, basically a written document. Usually you renew it annually. And in the MOU, you can spell out, here's what we're trying to do. Here's what we're going to do as a hub agency, and here's what our members are going to do. And these are our roles, and here's the responsibilities. And it's really important when you write those MOUs to be crystal clear about what you expect from members. Because remember, this is about change, and change is hard, right? And so you want to really spell that out. Now, we have some sample MOUs for you to look at that will help you think about language and topics and things. One of the pieces you'll want to attend to is people get nervous about sharing data, right? Well, if we load our members up with a child care management system, and now we can see their child and family information, we can see their financial data, which is essential. How do I know as a center that that's going to be protected? Well, we've done some research. We know how you can do that. We can share that information with you. It's actually pretty simple. You put it in writing, and you form agreements about how that data is going to be treated, right? And so an MOU is really helpful, but if you have a different idea for how you want to build the structure, we're happy to talk to you about that. Chances are we can find an example somewhere in the country for you to look at and learn from. So that's what we mean about governance. And again, if you diagram it, which is why I put this little smart art piece over here, if you diagram it, it will really help you think about relationships. Who relates to who? How does information flow? How does money flow? Those are all important questions, and a picture is often worth 1,000 words. Then you can take that and translate it into words.
I love what you said there. One about the picture being helping. I'm a very visual person, so having things very clearly diagrammed is wonderful for me, but I think also for all the partners. So then they understand where all that flow is going. I also really like the aspect, and I would encourage everybody to consider this, is that you will likely not need to completely start from scratch on anything here. Using the opportunity of working with Opportunities Exchange when we do our office hours to be able to say, this is what we're thinking, what's the model that fits us best? The same thing with those MOUs. There are lots of samples available. You still need to adjust and edit for your circumstances, but looking at the governance, it is unlikely that you would have a setup that is so unique that there's nothing that you could start on with that. So using all of those pieces to our advantage, so that way you're saving time and effort as you look to launch your hub. So the next big question that comes up then in the RFP, and as we consider what actually needs to be done with the services that are offered, is the type of staffing that might be needed to operate the hub. And I love what was shared here with us with this staffing, because I'm a big fan of the do's and don'ts. Learn from those who have done and understand why to do what they have done or why not to. So Sharon, if you can walk us through a little bit about how our applicants might approach this section around staffing and understanding how they could staff their hub.
Sure. So I stole the idea. My sister is a really big fan of these books. I haven't read them yet, so I might not get them exactly right, but like, eat this, don't eat this, right? It's important to know what to do. It's important to know what to avoid. So let me start with the avoid, what we don't want you to do, because our impulse as nonprofit professionals often is we get a grant and we think, what do we need to do? We need to hire a project manager. That's like, it's sort of like ingrained in us, and I get that. But we want you to be really careful when you're thinking about building the structure and staffing up to provide these services, that you don't create something that's really expensive for a couple of reasons. One is we don't want you to have to fundraise forever and ever and ever to sort of feed the beast, right? The second thing is, if we're creating another structure that's more expensive to run than the problem we're trying to solve, that's not very effective, right? Remember, we're trying to create something that will do it faster, better, cheaper, right? All of those things than what's happening now. So remembering that, put out of your mind job titles and descriptions. Instead, what we want you to do is to figure out what work needs to be done. And we're going to show you this, but this relates directly to the budget, which is where we're going next. So you'll see very concrete examples. But decide what jobs, what tasks need to be done. Try to figure out how much time you think it will take. Now, some of this is going to be a function of how many members you're going to have initially, right? We actually don't recommend that you start with too large a group, because you want to learn as you go. Inevitably, you're going to do some things that you're going to want to change, and better to do that with a small group. Learn from any missteps or mistakes with a small group. So if you're thinking about working with centers, you probably need a minimum of 3 to 5, but not more than 10 or 12 right out of the gate. So how many centers? How long is it likely to take for this person to do? Again, remember, automation is your friend, right? So if you're getting, like, for example, if you're doing invoicing, once you set up those invoices, you set it and they go. So you don't have to have somebody sitting every month preparing invoices. So how much time do you think it will take? Who in my organization, or sometimes an alliance will draw on a staff member in this program and a staff member in this. So find the expertise. Who's doing something like that right now? Could we buy a piece of their time? Could we peel off 1 day a week or a half a day a week for them to do that task? And if you begin to build your staffing infrastructure in that way, you're going to keep your costs really, really low, and you're going to find it's much easier to get to sustainability.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned about all of this correlating directly to the budget. We're going to get to the budget in just a few minutes, and you'll be able to see this reflected in there. We have a really great budget sample that you can use or do something similar to that that helps you walk through and understand those pieces. We do have this in here about technology. I'm going to put a plug in right now, though, that if you have specific questions about what technology would be the best option for you, for your organization, for your hub, or what technology would work for certain services that you're looking at, that is something that we would love to do a deeper dive based on your individual circumstances in our office hours. But as it generally relates to technology, we just want to make sure that everybody knows that there is an expectation that there is some technology component to what you're doing. Sharon has said it multiple times, and we're hoping it gets through to everybody. This is about automation. This is about saving time, saving hours, and being able to apply those towards other work and the work of childcare. So Opportunities Exchange has provided some examples, some things to think about with the childcare management systems and accounting software. But this is a component that I would love for anybody interested in applying to take a look first at the services you might want to offer, and then come join us for some of our office hours, and let's talk with Sharon and Amy about what type of technology might match the services you're looking to do. Because if we go down the technology rabbit hole right now, we will be there for the rest of our time together today and even more beyond that.
I will just say, though, Natalie, that I've spent the last 2 years of my life trying to get really smart about what products are on the market. And so I've got comparison spreadsheets, I've got interview protocols, I've got all kinds of things to help you with thinking about what's out there and what would best suit your needs. So we're really happy to help. If you're not already using a childcare management software and you're not sure where to go, we've got some very, very detailed tools to help.
Excellent. And that's exactly what we need. So if you are looking to apply and that is your situation, if you're already using something and it can be leveraged, that is wonderful. But if you're not, as you're looking at those services, that is definitely an opportunity to benefit from the experience and the knowledge that Sharon and Amy have when it comes to understanding how to match services to technology, to those metrics, to those outcomes, and all of those pieces. All right. The one last thing we'll look at before we dive into the budget is understanding who your members could potentially be. And Sharon already said earlier that it's really important to consider that you do not need to plan immediately for 100 members. The numbers and the examples that she gave for your consideration in the RFP, we're asking for you to identify 5 to 15 potential starting members. And so we're going to ask for a little bit of information about those members. We would like for you to consider who they could be, why you would be choosing them, help to understand what some of their needs are, what some of their concerns may be about joining the alliance, but also some of the characteristics or experiences that might be beneficial. We know that some of you are directly connected to early childhood coalitions or networks of providers in your regions that you may be serving. So if it is something that makes sense for you to start with coalition members or for you to start with this family childcare network as the group that you're first talking to about your hub and looking at, that's something that we want to know, that you have that intentionality of who you are asking. The other component we'll be asking about your members is how you are going to look to approach recruitment and marketing. As amazing as all of these services are and what you're looking to do, it is still, as Sharon has pointed out, it's change for them. It's scary. It's handing over my financial information or data that I've never shared outside of my organization before. So you are going to have to consider that you do need to market the hub to potential members, both for your starting point for your launch and for you to sustain the work of the hub as you continue through. So considering what tools or resources your organization already has when it comes to communication and how those could be leveraged for the hub, and then really spelling out very clearly the value proposition your hub is going to offer to the members. What is going to change for them because of what they're doing with the hub? So considering this from the starting point helps you hone in on that message and consider, how am I going to start? What are the members I'm going to identify first? And then what could I do later to entice more members? And as we look at the budget here in just a moment, you should be able to use the budget to help understand how many members you need to be sustainable with the services you've chosen for the hub, as well as understanding what their membership fee might be so that you're able to balance that all out. As Sharon has pointed out, that if you're not actually saving them some money, then they can't afford to be a member of the hub. There has to be that component to it. So I know we have about 15 more minutes, and I want to make sure we spend about 5 to 10 of the next minutes really going through the budget and the sustainability, because those are two areas that are going to have a lot of questions. With the budget, there is a sample budget on the grant webpage that you can view. We're going to look through it a little bit here, and Sharon's going to walk us through some of the components of it. I will say too, for this one, you don't have to use the sample budget provided. However, what you do have to do is answer all of the components or the questions that are present on the sample budget. So if you have another format that still hits all of those components, by all means, you can use that and upload it as part of your proposal. We just want to ensure that all the information captured there and that is specified in the RFP is present within your budget. So Sharon, I know that the budget is one area that has had a lot of conversations and a lot of questions already come my way. Can you tell us a little bit about what we might consider for the budget, and then we can walk through a couple of the example slides that we have?
Sure. So once again, the goal is efficiency so that you can become sustainable. And again, think about the work that you're trying to do, who's going to do it, and how much time is that going to take. So, and again, as you're thinking about staffing up, look around and see where you can find expertise. Because quite frankly, if a program, if one of the member agencies or the hub agency has, well, actually, you know what, we're going to look at how we connect the job description. So let me go, if we can go on to the next slide, Natalie, unless you want to add something.
Yes.
I will
Well,
show you
and
one
I'll
part.
say these next three slides are all snapshots from the budget spreadsheet. So I am a huge fan of organized spreadsheets, especially ones that already have formulas in it. So the budget spreadsheet is one that take a look at all the different components Sharon's going to walk you through. But any additional questions really diving into the budget is a great one for office hours because they are so unique to situations.
Exactly. So I just want to point out in this screenshot down at the bottom, there are two tabs on the budget sample we gave you. One is a budget, one has the numbers, and the other is the narrative. So over on the narrative, we go through and for each of these um, staff people that you see here, you see how they're all color coded. So the hub coordinator is in purple. You're going to see that purple is related to the job description and what that person is specifically going to be responsible for doing. The green line relates to the CEO. And look at how we've done that. We've taken a little piece of people who are sitting at the hub agency in this budget, and we figured out. So the HR clerk can actually run payroll on behalf of the center for this program in a few hours a week on behalf of all the programs, because she's pulling the data in from the child care management software system. So here's a person who's fully employed by the hub agency who, with an additional 3 or 4 hours a week, is able to perform that function on behalf of these centers, saving hours and hours of time over and over again for each of these centers. So when you look at the budget, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where you can really start to see the benefit of a deep, impactful shared service alliance. So,
Sharon, I'm going
let's
to go to
see.
the next
Oh,
slide because it details
sure.
a little bit more about what you're talking about. I love the way you guys broke it down in
Yeah,
here because it's not adding on a full-time position for each of these things. It's looking at
right.
who can give that chunk of hours for those specific services. So the
Exactly.
roles may be different, should be different, depending on the services that you have offered and who can offer those services. But then you break it down in the narrative to very specific functions that they're doing and therefore why they're being funded out of the hub and what the allocations are for that. So it paints a very clear picture of here is what the budget needs, here is the people power, but also here's the automation, the one-time startup cost, and then the ongoing technology support that's needed to make all of this function.
That's right. So look at, again, you see your colors there. If you relate back, those relate back to the actual title and the number, but you can start to connect the dots up, right? You can see. So the CEO, we are saying that the CEO is 0.05 FTE, which means just a few hours each week the CEO is going to work on this project. And what is that CEO going to do? Well, look down at the box below. Meet with the partners regularly to review progress, develop strategic direction, work on fundraising, negotiate contracts. So very high level stuff. So that's what I mean about thinking about the task. I want to point out one other to you, which is the HR clerk. So the HR clerk, I think I was wrong. I think the fiscal clerk bills for payroll, but look what the HR clerk does. Post job announcements, sort resumes. So they're helping, they're playing a role in this issue of programs, trying to find qualified staff. They have the capacity because they have an HR department, but they don't need to spend a ton of time. So 0.1 FTE. So that person is going to take 4 hours a week and work on behalf. And I should say this is for 3 centers, right? So your numbers might be a little higher if you've got 6 or 8 centers, but certainly not a full-time person really for any of these things. So I hope that is starting to make sense. I just want to have you look at one other number, which is down at the bottom of the first chart. Look at, we've got in the first year 0.74 FTE. We're able to deliver some really impactful back office services for less than a full-time person because we're approaching it in this way. So that's That's our word of wisdom.
Well, and what you can see here, you pointed out the HR clerk, those tasks are related to a very specific service. So if one of the services that you're looking to offer through your hub is around staff recruitment or onboarding, those are then tasks that relate to that service. If you're not looking to offer that service, it shouldn't be reflected in your task. So all of your tasks would directly coordinate back to the services that you're offering, and therefore you're able to offer them through your hub. There's one more
Exactly.
slide on the budget, so I'm going to forward through to that. I'm going to click on the right spot and then I'm going to forward through to that because I know we've already had at least one question come in about what would we possibly charge per member, as well as how do we look to create sustainability for the hub, which is another section that we have within our RFP so that it can operate beyond the initial launch funding.
Right. So in the revenue section of our sample budget, we showed the ELI grant, which if you look across, it comes to 100,000. And so we sort of straddled 2 fiscal years here and said, we're going to need a little money for startup. We're going to need a little more money in the first and a little in the second, right? But I want to call your attention to the member fees, because I know that's what everybody's really thinking about. And you need to think about that from the beginning. So here's our assumption, and this is in the budget narrative tab. Our assumption is in year one, the first 6 months, there's no charge because people are getting onboarded, they're getting acclimated, they're putting in a lot of time. We want to for them to get a sense of how this is going to work. After 6 months, those 3 members are paying $500 a month. $500 a month sounds like a lot, except that if you are now bringing in all of the money that's owed to you, if you've added 1 or 2 new kids because you've got the time to do the marketing and you're doing a better job with filling your classrooms, that more than wipes out that $500 a month, without question. Year 2, $500 a month for the free for the first member. Anyway, in year 2, we're adding 6 members, and you can sort of do the math. Now, we didn't take this out any further, but I want to call your attention to one other number, and that is the cost per member. So the actual cost of doing this with only 3 members in the first year, you see how low we've kept our budget. We've kept our budget down to $59,000. And by the way, that includes the monthly fee for the software. So it's an all-in budget. But when you divide that by 3 centers, it actually costs $18,000 a year to deliver the service. Again, I want to say that's cheaper than a full-time admin person sitting at each of those sites, but it's $18,000. When you double the number, you increase your cost a little, but you really start to get more efficiency. So now you drop that number down to 11,000. So as you build the size of the hub, you can really imagine being for a child care center to be able to access top-notch administrative support, automated practices, all of those things that we talked about for $11,000 or $12,000 a year. I mean, that's pretty unheard of. So you could see how actually easy it would be to get to sustainability if we're delivering impactful services.
And very important in there, only because I did this, is remembering that when you're looking at the cost per month and then the cost per year, because I was like, how do you get from 11,000 to 500? That's because there are 12 months in a year, which is why the budget is made to be very user friendly for that and to help you go through and do it.
Right.
So Sharon spoke a little bit to this as we talked about the budget, but the last section that you'll have to talk about within your RFP is the sustainability plan. And when we're looking at this, what we're talking about is the sustainability of the hub. How are you going to continue to operate after the Stronger Together grant has all been expended? So she really related it back, and I think it comes to all of this, that you have to be efficient in what you're doing. And we ask you to consider, which you'll be able to do by working through the budget, your idea membership compensation or composition, the number of members, maybe the type, the size of providers that you would be looking for in order for you to continue operating. And working through the budget is going to give you insight into that answer. So it is part of the process and the reason we ask about sustainability after you've done the budget, so that you have an idea of what you need to do and how you need to structure it for your members. It's really important to consider then too that the hub can only be sustainable if you're actually doing the work that you need to do. So what we have here is kind of almost a formula that Opportunities Exchange has shared with us for you to really consider what you're doing and what you're enabling your hub members to be able to do. Through your services, you should be enabling them to increase that revenue, as Sharon has pointed out, filling all their seats, getting all the funds in for those seats, accessing all the funding streams. You should also be allowing them to reduce their expense by that automation, replacing labor time, or joint purchasing. Both of those things together allows them to adjust their overall budget, which means that they can afford the hub fees and have that ongoing budgeted, and that they see the benefit of, I'm getting this much out of a service that costs me this much. And therefore, they're able to take the additional funds and redeploy them into that pedagogical focus. If you are not saving them money, they're not able to do those two things, and therefore your hub cannot be sustainable. We are not looking for Early Learning Indiana to fund a 12-month project. We are looking for Early Learning Indiana through the Stronger Together grants to fund the launch of a hub that is able to operate and be sustainable, increase their membership, and therefore continue to meet the needs of childcare providers in their local communities. So if you have concerns about the sustainability, I would encourage you to come talk with us at our office hours. I would encourage you to email and to look at your budget and see, do we have this price? Do we have the right services? Do we have the right technology so that our members get the change that we're telling them they're going to get? And therefore, we can increase our membership. If your hub is bringing in the right amount of money, but not actually allowing for the providers to have funds that they can redeploy into their quality focus, you're not meeting the purpose of the shared service hub. So it's something that we would love to go into in more depth with you. I do want everybody to understand, though, that this is not a project. This is the launching of a shared service hub that can thus be implemented ongoing within your community beyond the grant. So we are going to get into our questions. I know we've had a few come in. I'm going to actually leave this up while we do questions rather than our question screen, just because I want everybody to be able to write down those dates. You can join from our office hours directly from the grant webpage. There's a little join button towards the top of it. So if you are interested, have additional questions, you can bring anybody you want to from your organization onto those. So if your CFO would like to join us because he has specific questions about something, or your CEO has 3 things that they want answered about what their role would be or how this would look, invite anybody from your teams to join us, and we will be available on those 4 dates. I'm going to pull open our questions now, so bear with me just a second as I pull these out and make this bigger and see if there's some questions we can answer.
Natalie, this is Amy. While you're
Yes.
looking that up, could I feed one to Sharon?
Yes, please do.
So we just had a great question about member use of technology and whether members needed to use the same technology. And I answered briefly, but I wondered, Sharon, if in answering it more fully, you could also speak to how we often find that providers may have and pay for a certain CCMS, but aren't truly using it effectively.
Absolutely. So it's certainly possible to provide a back office service for individual providers who each use a different software. You can absolutely do that. You will not get to the kind of efficiencies that you want to without having a common data platform. Another reason to have a common platform is that you can aggregate the data and you can look across the hub. You can compare apples to apples. You can sort of understand performance of individual members, how folks are doing relative to one another, and begin to analyze and identify things, practices that they could learn from one another. So there are a lot of reasons why a common data platform is really important. I'll say this about what Amy just referenced, and that is that more than likely, if a center is actually fully utilizing a child care management software, like using all of the elements and really on top of benefiting from it, they are probably not going to be the kind of program that really needs the hub services most
True.
of all. What we have found is often providers say, yes, I use management software. This is what I use, but I don't use it for billing. I don't use it to collect money. I'm only using the parent education piece of it. You'd be surprised at how often we hear that from folks. If they are using a management system right now and the hub thinks that there's a better solution and they want everybody to get on it, the good news is the records that are in the system now can be very easily transferred. It's a matter of downloading into usually Excel or another kind of spreadsheet and uploading it. You know, it urge you.
All right. It looks like we have just a few other questions. Amy was able to answer several of them. So if you already got an answer from Amy, I know her answer for several of them was please reach out to Natalie. And that is because we know that each of our potential applicants are going to have unique situations. But two of the questions I do want to make sure everybody hears the answer to is there is an other box for services. You will be asked to define what the other service is, as well as the metrics questions for that as well. So if there is something that is very unique to your community identified as a need that's not already present, you can tell us. As well as noting that we did get in a little bit on the budget about how to figure out maybe what that reasonable membership fee would be, but we'd also really encourage that we look at what are the actual services you're offering, and therefore how does that relate to what's needed and where that comes in the budget for the membership fee. The last question that I would love to answer for everybody is, are the office hours open to all applicants, or do we need to schedule time? That sounds like a really easy question, and my answer is going to be yes and no. What I would love to say for that is that the office hours are open. They're going to be on Zoom, so we invite you to join us, ask questions, jump off if you don't have questions, if yours have been answered. We've done this for a couple of our other opportunities. It does mean sometimes you have to wait your turn to hear a question answered, but it also means that what we can do is, because we're using Zoom, if there's somebody who has a bunch of questions about technology, I can invite them and Sharon to go into a breakout room and spend some time really discussing that while I answer other questions. Or we can identify in the office hours that we need to set up a one-to-one time just to work with you on your specific questions, and we can do that as well. So everybody is open to come, and if we need to schedule some individual time based off of what your questions are, we will do that as well. So you can always reach out to us in the meantime and let us know about your situation. We can say, yes, this is a great one to bring to office hours. I'm sure several people will have this question. We may do some things on office hours like walk through the entire budget, those types of things, but it really just depends on who joins us and what they want to ask about. And we do have a couple other questions that came in. So if you guys are okay to stay for just a moment, I'll take a look at some of those. Could Hub start with just one potential service with the goal to expand? I would say look at whether or not just a single service is going to meet your needs when you look at your budget and your sustainability, because several of the services are connected when you think about them. So it may be one focus, so around hiring or around enrollment, but there may be several services with enrollment that you could potentially offer because they are all part of that same technology solution. So if you're not sure about what services, let's talk about what some of the needs are for the providers in your area and where they could match a service. And then another question, do you ever get pushback about classrooms being full and how to handle transitions with new programs participating with hub services in the Golden Triangle? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that when shared service hubs are launching and operating, they probably get pushback about almost everything. And I think a lot of that relates to what Sharon has shared with us around just the capacity for change. So that would be something that I think would be a great one to talk about when we look at marketing and your membership composition and how you can engage members in wanting to participate.
Natalie, I have a great story, and I'll talk really fast.
Mm-hmm.
So I encountered a member agency one time who, when they started taking apart the budget, we realized that they had 10 preschool children in a classroom with 2 teachers. And we said, yikes, that's really expensive. You need to fill those classrooms up. And the director said, but the teachers don't want to. They really like having 10 kids in the classroom. And we said, well, it's costing $40,000 a year for that service. So you need to make some decisions. Ultimately, that program dropped out because they weren't willing to make that change. But that's, you know, it's about choices, right? So, yeah.
And I think it speaks to definitely having those MOUs, because then it would be something that you're looking at. This is what you're agreeing to, and this is what we're agreeing to. And if you can't agree to that, you can't be a member, is essentially what it is. We had one more question pop up in here. We're thinking of contracting with public school food services to provide meals and snacks to ECE programs. Would that qualify as a hub service? That would be considered bulk purchasing. I know sometimes in our minds when we think of bulk purchasing, my mind immediately goes to things like crayons and markers and paper that gets used very frequently and used up. But bulk purchasing can be anything where you are contracting for services to provide anything that is expendable that's coming in quantity to save on price. All right, well, we have hit most of the questions here. I will say if we did not answer your question, that is because I'm going to be reaching out to you individually, or you can reach out to me because you have very specific circumstances. So I'm just going to end with us saying thank you. Reach out to us if you have those additional questions, and I hope to see and hear from many of you on our upcoming office hours on February 4th and 18th and March 4th and March 18th, so that you are able to turn in proposals that really reflect your true intentions and the capacity of your organization to launch these hubs and make a difference in the way that we are approaching supports for early childhood providers in our state. So Sharon and Amy, thank you for joining us today, and we will look to talk with you guys again here on February 4th for office hours.
Great.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.